Welcome to another episode of the MaxiBloom versus the MaxiGrow. In the previous two episodes, we grew peppers and lettuce just to see what the differences would be in the MaxiBloom versus the MaxiGrow. You can find those two episodes at the end of this video or in the video description. In this episode, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be growing all 4 pepper plants in the MaxiGrow, and then at some point when it starts to flower and just when it starts to produce the fruit after they've been pollinated, we're going to be switching half of these containers over to the MaxiBloom and leave the other half in the MaxiGrow. So all the plants will be the same size, hopefully, and then we'll see if we have any more or less peppers in the MaxiBloom or in the MaxiGrow. So as usual, we're going to be doing this experiment as fair as possible. I'm going to be using my par meter to make sure the par levels are the same at each plant top. We're going to be growing under this MarsHydro EP3 strip light, and we're going to come back here once these seedlings start to sprout, and then we'll go from there. Alright, it has been 16 days since I've started this experiment, and you can see we have germination in all of the containers, and I actually started with 5 seeds per net pot, and all the seeds were from the same pepper. And what I did here is I actually called out the ones that were all of different sizes and germinated at different times, just to make sure that all of these seedlings were roughly the same, if not identical, so that we can make this experiment as fair as possible. So we're going to come back in a little while, probably when I'm about to top the plants, and we'll talk about this further. Alright, it has been almost 1 month since the last segment of this video, and that means it's now time to top each one of these plants. I'm going to do so at the same node, and that's just to make sure that these don't grow too tall. I want to keep them shorter and bushier for these size containers. Alright, the plants are now all topped, and it was a little bit tricky matching the nodes here, and it's because some of these have offset nodes. Now, if you look over here at this one, you can see that both of these leaves split apart right at the same spot on the plant stem. If we look over here on a plant like this in the back, you can see that this one here, these are all offset. So what I basically did is I just left the same amount of leaves on each one of these. Even if these nodes didn't quite match up, they all pretty much have 4 leaves left on them. And I did that way basically because, the leaves of a plant are basically solar panels, and that's where it collects the energy, and they need to have the same amount of leaves for it to be fair, so they all collect the same amount of energy to push up new branches. And just a quick note here as far as light output goes. I've been running this light, the MarsHydro FCE3000, at about 50% power the entire time, and I just increased it to about 60% output, and this is what we're looking at for power light output at the plant tops, so about 370 micromoles at each one of these plant tops. And you can see here that these are not quite evenly spaced out, and that's just because the light reflections of the walls and everything inside the tent is not exactly even. So I had to move these into positions here where they would all be the same. You wouldn't know that unless you had a way to measure that with a good light meter. And most people wouldn't necessarily need that unless you're doing experiments. That's why I have this. But that's what we're going to be doing for the rest of the time, because as these plants grow up taller to about here or so, this is going to reach around 500 micromoles, which will be perfect for the rest of the experiment to produce the fruit and everything. So I won't be increasing the output of this, although I could if I needed to. This does have quite a bit of power, this light here, so it's pretty nice. So we'll come back and see what happens. Alright, it has now been 2.5 months since I started this experiment, and I have not changed the solution in these containers ever since then. I know, it's crazy. So I started out with 5 grams of this MaxiGrow per gallon, and each one of these containers holds almost a full gallon. And I started with that, and the only thing I've done over the past 2 weeks is I've added 3 cups of water, of straight water with no nutrients, into each one of these containers, just because this one here was getting a little bit low because this is the larger plant, or the largest of all of them. Not by too much, but it is bigger. So that's pretty amazing to me, actually, that these are still growing here. They don't really show any major deficient signs. Maybe they're starting to get a little bit low on nitrogen just by a little bit with some of these lower leaves, but that could be mostly natural. In fact, if you actually look at, this is the first, this was the seed leaf here, not even the first true leaf. This is still here, and it's barely even turned yellow yet. So there's still plenty of nitrogen in all of these all of the solutions, I should say. So now it has gotten to the point where it is now time to switch over these 2 containers on this side. We're gonna, right now all of these have the MaxiGrow, and we're gonna switch over to the MaxiBloom over with just these two containers, and we're going to refill these two with more of this MaxiGrow. So as I said, I have not changed out the solution whatsoever. All I did was add those 3 cups of water in the past 2 weeks just to make sure they wouldn't dry up. So I don't know, it just amazes me, it really does. This is the, the Kratky style. If I was aerating the solution, this would have evaporated a long time ago. I would have had to continue to add water. And this is why I'm using the Kratky for these experiments, because it's more controllable. I'm not really affecting the pH by aerating the solution, and it's not causing evaporation too quickly where I got to keep adding solution and changing a lot of stuff with the solution, changing the chemistry of it. So if we look here a little bit closer, you can see that these are now starting to produce these little flowers, and they're going to be starting to open up and start producing the peppers. So before they open up and produce a full flower, this is now when I want to change over to the MaxiBloom. And I don't want excess nitrogen to affect the experiment. So if I was to start this, if I was to do a switch over with the MaxiBloom here, when these have already started to produce peppers, it's kind of too late at that point. I don't want any nitrogen to affect the growth of peppers. I want to just keep this experiment as true as possible to what I'm trying to accomplish here. So I also wanted to note, before we move on to the next segment of this video, I wanted to note that this, I did mention this is the largest plant, although not by much. If you look here, you have this plant, and then you got the plant in the back. That's actually the smaller plant of the 4. This plant here is only slightly larger than the one in the back over there, and then this one here is almost as big as the one here in the front. So when you look at this, it kind of averages out. So I think this should work out really well. And also, just for the sake of the experiment, this plant here probably has the best chance of producing the most peppers out of all 4 of them using the MaxiBloom. So if this has any chance whatsoever to do better producing fruit, or in this case the peppers, this is going to be it. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next segment and see what happens. All right, it's been about a week and a half since I started giving the plants here on the right the MaxiBloom, and continued giving the plants on the left the MaxiGrow. And I needed to make a quick update here to kind of show something. The plant here on the front right that was actually doing better of the 4 is now showing some signs of some issues. That's actually started happening about 2 days after I did the first change out. I've done 2 since then. And I think it's actually starting to do better, but at first, within 2 days, these leaves here kind of started turning like a lighter green color, and now they are showing more to be more yellow. And a lot of these are actually falling off. But some of these new leaves that are growing out are actually okay. At first, I thought it was actually an issue with the roots. Maybe it was getting root rot or some sort of disease, something like that. I think it's pulling out of it, with whatever was going on there. But when I pulled the roots out of here, they looked healthy, just as healthy as all the rest, nice and white, and they smelled good and everything, so it wasn't a root problem. It also could have just been going through some sort of a shock from the transition. Now, the one in the back there looks pretty healthy. The ones on the right, because these actually are getting more nitrogen with the MaxiGrow, these look like a nice, healthy, darker green color. They look really healthy. The plant on the back right there, it's almost as good as these, but there's a slight difference. The leaves aren't quite as dark green as it is getting less nitrogen. That makes sense. But you can see both of the plants here on the left are both now bigger in just a short amount of time versus the plants here on the right, since I switched it over to the MaxiBloom. So I just wanted to make that update here to kind of show something, just in case something progresses and gets worse, just kind of show where we're at. You can see the plants on the left are doing much better already. So these here, I'm pretty much assuming that they are going to be producing more peppers, or at least more weight in peppers versus the plants here on the right. So time will tell. We'll come back and take a look. All right, it has finally come time to end this experiment, because a lot of these peppers here that have been growing, they don't seem to be getting any larger at this point. I've been kind of watching them over the past 2 weeks. So we're going to go ahead and end this here. We're going to count and weigh them. Before we do that, a couple things here to note. So if you remember in the past parts of this video, this plant right up here in the front right was the one that was the larger one of all of them, at least by a little bit. And since we switched over to the MaxiBloom in these 2 and kept giving the MaxiGrow to these 2, this is now the smaller of all the plants, and the one that appears to be the least amount of peppers on it. So it's kind of weird the way that worked out. Although I wasn't really expecting these 2 here on the right to actually grow much more, because that's just how it works. When you give plants less nitrogen, they typically don't grow as much or as well. So you can see the plants over here on the left, these have more leaves, they're darker green, and they have a lot more peppers growing on them, and that's pretty much as I expected. So one thing here with the light, just like I said before, when these grew up to this height, they were getting about 550 micromole or so, each one of these, probably except for like these taller leaves in the back, but that's kind of beside the point. I did increase, about 3 weeks ago, I did increase the light to about 75% output, which increased the intensity at the plant tops to about 750 micromole, between 700 and 750, depending on where you measure it up here. But that's just because I wanted the peppers to start growing a little bit faster. So that's it. I'm going to go ahead and pull these plants and cut the peppers off. We'll probably take a look at the roots as well. Actually, I'll just show those to you right now. So here is the front plant, the one that was getting the MaxiBloom. These are the roots here. They're going to look a little bit more brown on camera. That's just the white balancing. They do have a slight brown color, and they smell really good, actually. They're not unhealthy at all. And the ones over here in the MaxiGrow, pretty much identical. They're just a little bit more dense, and there's just a little more of them. But yeah, and they smell pretty much exactly the same. At this point, it's kind of like a nutty smell. Before, when they were more white looking, they had more of a sweeter smell to them, I guess. But the ones in the back, they're pretty much identical. But we're not here to look at the roots. Just kind of showed that they pretty much are the same. So let's go ahead and weigh and count these peppers. All right, the results are in, and I figured I'd do all the counting and weighing off camera to save some time here. Got everything written down. This bin here are the ones that were grown in the MaxiGrow the entire time, and the bin on the right here is the ones that were grown in the MaxiGrow and then switched over right when it started flowering to the MaxiBloom. And really, they look pretty much all the same. There's just more of them over here in the bin on the left that were grown in the MaxiGrow the entire time. As far as how many there are, there's 59 in the bin on the left, and the ones that were grown in the MaxiBloom, there is 34. So there is almost double the amount that was grown in the MaxiGrow the entire time. As far as the average per pepper, the average weight per pepper, it is 12.2 grams per pepper on average with the ones that were switched over to the MaxiBloom, and it was 10.4 grams per pepper with the ones that were grown in the MaxiGrow the entire time. Now, part of the reason there is a lower average weight, and it's not really that much, by the way, part of the reason why there's a lower average weight is because there's simply more of them here, and over here, the one plant in the back actually had the most of them, and a lot of the peppers, the smaller peppers, were kind of like the ones grown in the MaxiGrow. But the plant in the front right, the one that was the smallest and the least amount of peppers, on that one there was a lot less peppers. I believe only 12 in total, and there was very few small ones on it. So if that one in the front would have grown more peppers like the one behind it that was also grown in the MaxiBloom, we probably would have saw a pretty close to average weight per pepper. So really what this is showing here is that if you are growing a plant that produces, so something that you eat, produce, so fruits or vegetables or whatever, it doesn't make any sense to switch it over to the MaxiBloom right before it starts to produce its fruit or vegetables. Because anytime you're growing a plant that's producing something that you eat, most of the time, you really need more nitrogen. And this has a 10, that has a 5. So you really want to keep it going with nitrogen if you want to grow stuff that you're eating off of it. The MaxiBloom is mainly for growing stuff, or mainly for flowering. And the reason why you switch that over from the MaxiGrow to the MaxiBloom is to stop giving it so much nitrogen so it stops producing foliage and puts more growth into the flowers. And that is why in the next episode we're going to do just that. We're going to be growing some flowers. So if you like this video, follow along, and it shouldn't be as long as this one. This was 4 months total. The flowers apparently that I'm going to be growing are going to take 30 to 40 days. So I'll see you in that video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.